WEFM, the clean, fresh sound. Activated mornings on WEFM 99.9 is on now.
Welcome. Welcome back, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, to Activated Mornings. This is our open forum, or Talk to Me If You May, where we allow you to call in to give your suggestions, topics, whatever you want to talk about, and we will talk about it. The number to call is 457-9997. Also, the number to WhatsApp, 457-9997. You're listening to Ari, and with me this morning is Christal. Christal Keys, apparently.
Christal who?
Keys. That's the first name come to my head. Because you have to be Alicia Keys' sister. You're always coming in here singing and happy.
You just jealous.
Just a tiny bit.
Just jealous.
But one thing I wanted to talk about this morning, based on a discussion that I had recently with a few young professionals. And the discussion basically was centered around their ability to execute certain projects or to do certain things, and also their the resources available and the current system in place to allow them to be successful in their different areas of work. And it made me question, is there some sort of disconnect? Because it really does seem like when it is that young people want to implement certain things in whatever department, ministry, or whatever sector you're in, private, public, whatever it is there still an old guard that is preventing a lot of things from happening because they believe that the current way things are being done is the correct way, and improving said things could only be done in their way. There's also the question as to whether it is a person's in authority, or let's say the managers or the supervisors, whether they believe that unless they came up with an idea, the idea isn't valid. Well, what are your thoughts on what I'm saying?
For me, it doesn't matter what it is. There's between the old and the younger generation, there's sometimes I don't want to quantify it, but we've seen it. With the bickering.
Let's start to pick up in there. We have a quick call. Hey, good morning, caller. You live?
Hi, Annie, good morning. Hi, Christal, good morning.
Hey, good morning.
I want to occupy your time a little with some conspiracy theories pertaining to the topic. Would you indulge me?
Yes, go ahead.
Let me get my popcorn.
Okay, so I just want to give a little discussion on what I know from a lot of research that I have done. Now, I'm a literature major, so I had to do a lot of history. I had to follow the different eras as time progressed, the socio-political theories. I would have done all the philosophers in my little literary theory, from Nietzsche, Heidegger, you name it, all of them coming down. So over time, when we got to about structuralism, you started seeing a pattern, because that's what the structuralists did, like Claude Levi-Strauss, these guys. They basically sat down and said, society does not exist haphazardly. There is a system, there's a structure, and no matter what time period you exist in, there is a system that is governing you. You just can't see it because you're in the box. Mm-hmm. You only get to see it when and then started showing everybody the picture that, hey, we're in this box. And then people are like, well, this is not a very nice box. And then they start rebelling against it. I want to take y'all on a journey. Now, back when feudalism existed, feudalism is a system where you had lords, and these lords owned everything, and they would give peasants sections of land to work, but they would go and they would collect whatever the peasants created on the land. If you're a locksmith, a wheelwright, or you have produce, like you create something with a skill, it will still tell you, well, for living things. So these lords basically owned everything, and they were able to extract and exploit from others. Eventually, we call these people the proletariat. They're the skilled working class in opposition to the bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie are the ones without money. When the proletariat realized what was really going on, that they're basically slaves in a system, they started to rebel. So that's how the Soviet Union and the Czars and all of them, they eventually had to flee. They had to give up their aristocracy and so on. But they fled. These families still exist. Even the lineage of the you can trace it back to Germany, you can trace it back to the Soviet Union. These people, even Queen Elizabeth's husband was a former Tsar. He was from a German family. Majority of their lineage is German and so on. But I digress. Let me get back on track. These people did not decide to live like plebeians, right? They decided that they're going to create a new system where they're going to give the proletariat the illusion of choice, that they have power in choosing who controls them. Okay? So that is why we have democracy. Democracy is where they say these so-called plantations, because these are what the colonies are. We're all just plantations owned by lords and overseers. So it will give these plantations the illusion of independence. But their independence is not fully independent where the proletariat can control what happens. We will put in place an organization known as a government. Now, the government is not a party. The government is a system that has no choice but to abide by the lords' decisions and decrees, whether it be in the form of constitution or these neo-colonial imperialist organizations like the UN, NATO, and EU. Okay? These organizations are run by people who belong to the three major bourgeoisie families that operate either under the Vatican City. The Vatican City is its own independent organization. It is run by these lords. Washington, D.C., also not a state, but its own independent organization, sovereign. And, London City, which is the one that we have to abide by based on our constitution, etc., etc. Now, these lords, they are recluse. We don't know them. We don't know of these organizations. That is beyond our necessary knowledge as plebeians, right? So we don't know who is in charge. So we can't rebel. We can't hold them accountable. We can't fight against them. But these so-called governments, which are subsidiaries of these neo-colonial imperialist organizations, they have to abide by what they say. Now, mercenary, the word mercenary, as you know, is a paid murderer. Now, the word soldier, if you look at the etymology of the word soldier, means mercenary paid by wages. It's a waged mercenary. Basically, you are paid by the organization, the government, or the organization UN, NATO, etc., to maintain the status quo. Anyhow, a government decides to go against the ruling imperialist organization, they will send in soldiers to say, you are not doing legal things. Where these laws came from are from the lords. So if you're not doing what the lords say, then they will send in soldiers to say you're operating against Geneva Conventions and da-da-da-da-da, and they will destabilize your economy because they have learned that if the proletariat becomes too powerful, they will overthrow the system. So, one, a lot of talk about how the government use taxes and whatever. Research debt slavery for me, please. I am a 37-year-old female. I am paying taxes to pay debt that people incurred in the 1970s, 1960s. What this debt was for? regular amenities like hospitals and schools, things we as people can build, come together as communities and build, right? That we can sell and have bartering and so on, just like how it was in the agrarian society where they would barter amongst themselves. We can barter and we can create, but we are not allowed. Because every time we go to these organizations, France don't have to pay any interest on their loans. They get them sometimes 0%, 1%. We, the poorer nations, have to pay 10 and 12 and 17% on these loans. That is not haphazard. That is by choice. That we pay for our own comfort. We basically let them benefit because we have to comfort. We need a hospital. Okay, we will give you money to build this hospital, but you have to pay us double that. So the healthcare, for what? It holds us back. The government, whatever party is in the position, it's like if it's a principal of a school, whoever is the individual in charge of that, they have to abide by the laws. And the laws, especially trade laws, especially laws pertaining to banking, because again, these large imperials is who own the banks. Every bank is a subsidiary of a larger bank, right? So the USBG operates under ECCB, and ECCB, which is Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, operates under the International Central Bank, and all of these banks are just subsidiaries of the imperials. When they have their prospectus and all of that, and they say, for example, in the 2017 prospectus, the Bank of St. Vincent, when it was sold, well, not sold, but it was as a subsidiary of ECCB with the 49 to 51% shares. One of the stipulations of that prospectus was the business sector is not taking loans anymore. So we have to appeal to the private sector through, and you want to hear what they say they are appealing the private sector for, to increase sales through that? Student loans and mortgages. Guess who was the person who came and talked about education and every home having a university graduate and whatever? They were basically selling you debt. They hired politicians to sell you debt. They told you, go ahead and get these university degrees. No needs assessment was done to ensure that the university degree that you're doing is needed in the country, relevant in the country, so that when you come back, you will be employed and we can pay you for your merit, for your qualifications. The only emphasis was get you in a university to get you on a student loan. The education revolution, if you're going to revolutionize something, yes, go ahead.
No,
No.
I was just listening and following along. But is this Charmaine?
Right. Yes, it is.
Morning.
Good morning.
Go
Now,
ahead,
the
go ahead.
education revolution, if you're going to revolutionize something, and you're going to start from the bottom up, if you want to look at how the monies were allocated from these organizations, they came in and they gave us money. We're going to give you money to educate your teachers. We're going to give you money to educate this one. So we got lots of grants. None of these were for early childhood. How are you going to tell somebody who is working for, how are you going to tell somebody who's working for $150 a week to send their child to a preschool where the preschool is charging $450 a month because they have an early childhood curriculum? So we still have students going into kindergarten with no assessment of their needs, no formal, no prior introduction to the education system. And then you just start them pushing work. Those who fail, there is no alternative. There is no other form of learning. There are different types of education. There are different types of schools. The public school system is just one system. There are no Montessori public schools and so on for visual learners who want to do the experiential learning and all of that. Nothing so. The only thing they pushed was getting secondary schools expanded so they can get the college expanded so they can get university matriculation increased. because that's what the bank and the government decided would be best to increase debt sales so that the bank would make more money, so that the economy would look good, so that we would have more money to pay back to the central bank, which is the imperialist organization. So if you look up debt slavery, you would realize that Simmons is just a plantation. And the overseers are there to enforce the rules that are in writing from these imperialist organizations. A lot of people say, well, the government using money to do this. The government is using the money in the way in which they were told. They have no other choice but to use money. If you don't believe me, look up Life and Debt documentary. It is about how the IMF ruined the Jamaican economy with these same trade rules and regulations. When Jamaica wanted to inject more money in farming, they told them they cannot do that. They have to increase trade. So then the farmers couldn't compete with the foreign industrial farms, and the Jamaican farming industry and agricultural industry took a hit. We cannot control this rain situation. We cannot control that. They would have made deals that are signed in private that we don't know about. And I'm speaking from experience because my husband was a diplomat for years. These rules and regulations, we plebeians, the proletariat, we cannot control it. The bank is not going to give young people business loans. They're not going to give young people the freedom to enact creativity and take initiative and be innovative, because they will threaten the system. Your best bet is to fall in line in the blockchain, fall in line, and make sure you pull your ball and chain and follow the rules and pay your taxes. Why would I set up good retirement funds for these young, innovative tech natives so that when they retire, they can then threaten the system with the money accrued over their pension and so on? It is there to keep us dependent.
Question, Chairman.
Are
you implying two things here? One, right, that the dispute between is by the dispute between the younger generation and the older generation in the workforce is by design, as in that's the way the system was set up and the older folks know about it.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Mm-hmm. Okay, go ahead with the next. What was the next question?
Or is it because the older generation, it's an ego issue, so they don't want to
No. I will tell you why it's not an ego issue, because it's an international issue. The pension reform is not pension reform of St. Vincent. It is a global international pension reform, all of which lead right back to the banks. Right? So during the boomer generation, which was in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s there, you would have seen people owning property, they would have owned cars, they would have sent their children to college. Everything was, you were able, do you know the civil service order said that we are supposed to work 35 hours a week? These boomers left Friday at 11 o'clock when you're working at government, because that was the time stipulated. You get the rest of that afternoon to prepare for your Sabbath on Saturday and to rest up with your family on Sunday. I don't know how the 40-hour work week was introduced, but somehow it was put on us. If you were to look in the civil service orders, it still says you're supposed to work 35 hours a week, right? So these people enjoyed lesser working times, right? And their pay was reasonable. Within that generation there, we have inflation of up to 333%. That is by design, because they realized that as people became more independent through business ownership and entrepreneurship, that they were able to challenge the system. So then inflation became an issue. This pension reform issue, they were protesting France about it. They were protesting different countries in the world about this pension reform. It's not sentence. Even Barbados had protests about the pension reform. Because if you look at these statistics, they're saying the boomer generation, right, is about 8.8 million, right, more than what the younger generation, because this younger generation, we're not making as many children. So what that means, the way how taxes work is me who have 3 children, my children are going to have to work to pay taxes for their NIS, to pay for my pension, my husband's pension, and the pension of the people who never had children. So when you look at the generation now, where we are not saving as the boomers did, we are spending more. We are spending more in toxic assets, as in parties, clothes, vehicles, so on. We're not owning. And that is perfect for the system, because if we do not own, then when we become older, we have no fixed assets. So we are dependent. And then we're going to have to support this older generation. These retirees that are gatekeeping don't realize that they're keeping at their own detriment. They're gatekeeping because they're preventing younger people from excelling and having ownership. But the young people are the ones who are going to have to pay their pension. So the pension issue is not a localized issue. It's an international issue, simply because the aging population is so large and the younger population is so small, but yet so frivolous in their spending that there's literally nothing that is being there to assist. So the slavery is going to be even more. It's going to be more. We're going to have no control. We're going to have the same way we had the Mexians and we had no control because many of us had mortgages that we had to pay. And it's going to be even more control. And it's going to be highly, highly impoverished because we're going to have to pay higher taxes and more taxes to assist the generation that is older and cannot help themselves, as well as the numerous amounts of disabled children due to autoimmune disorders, women making children older, the quality of the younger generation, many of them have disabilities and so on. So when you hear Bill Gates talk about overpopulation and being too much, he's just looking at the money, and he's looking at the fact that in the years come, the older generation, much like China, will not supply themselves, and the younger generation will basically be working to take care of this older generation. They'll have no freedom. They'll have to work longer hours just to make ends meet, because the taxes are going to keep going up to provide health care, especially health care when people are not taking their health seriously. Many of these people are going to have non-communicable diseases, and they're going to be a strain on the economy. It's going to be terrible. But all we're doing is sitting down and talking about NIS, and nobody is looking at how we can come together and unite as the people who overthrow the feudalism did, to reconstruct the system in a way so that we can be comfortable in our older years. There are so many documents about it, but Vincentians are myopic.
Hold on. Charmaine, I don't know. When people speak along certain lines, the responses sometimes is, "Oh, they're crazy. They don't know what they're talking about."
I am not myopic.
Yeah, I know people will say, I know a lot of people will think this is crazy, but you know what I usually do? I usually tell people, if you can research this on your own and you can find no flaw in my logic, then if your logic has no historical, scientific, or any basis, whose logic is really flawed and who's really crazy? Because everything that I have said, you can Google. There are documentaries, there are documents, right? They're literally, when you do diplomacy, there's a whole theory that is structured behind this thing. These people are not operating as politicians because they think this is the way it is supposed to be done. Most laymen assume that things are done haphazardly, but they don't understand every single thing in this world. Even how we learn language, how we socialize, everything is a structure. If you do structuralism.
Hello? Is
Hello?
it me?
No, that's not us. That's not us. Hello?
Right.
Okay, yeah,
The
she's there.
reason why we assume, the reason why we assume things are as they are is because we are born in the system, we are indoctrinated in the system. We ourselves know the doctrine that is guiding these set principles, but we accept them. When you become a person who starts to look at structure and you start digging deep and you start looking for foundational principles, that is when you start seeing where what is being done in practice is not what is reflected in theory. So if you think that this thing sounds very weird and crazy and conspiracy theory-like, I dare you. Google, and I don't mean Google blogs, I mean Google documentaries that are backed by BBC and these sort of people. I want you to look at scholarly articles from people who did diplomacy degrees and they did their dissertations and so on. Because the economies are changing, and even those economies have theorists that show different types of economies and what economies would work. If, for example, we're in a liberalist economy, but when you look at the way it is supposed to be conducted, it's not. Where are the free markets? Where, you understand? Everything is guided by rules and regulations. And I think as intentions, we don't look for the documentation. For example, as a teacher, there are numerous documentations that explain the rights and responsibilities of teachers and students. Teachers don't read those things. And a lot of what happens in school is against the law. It is not even supposed to be done. You can't force a child to say prayers and those things. These are things that are written in law. But we accept them because we don't know what the rules state. But when you know the structure and you see the structure, then you start to see cracks. You start to see things in the structure that is not practical and it does not afford sustainability.
You know, the irony
So that's
is,
just the conspiracy theory. So the reason why we're not getting loans as young people is because it is meant to maintain the status quo. If we don't do that, they're going to do like Haiti and say that we're doing some corrupt stuff. They're going to send soldiers down here to destabilize us and make sure that we fall back in line.
the irony is,
That's
you
all
can
it
see
is.
cracks in the structure, but I'm not seeing any cracks in your argument. Have you watched or read If I Were the Devil by Paul Harvey?
No, I haven't, but I would.
You should
I have
check out
read the book.
If
I
I
have read the book Outwitting the Devil.
mm,
And that's a really, really good book because it basically explains how these imperialist organizations use like people who are not steeped in righteousness. That's the only combat that we have for corruption and righteousness. And as you can see, there's a constant erosion to and religion in all societies.
yeah.
So the more we move away from the structure of righteousness is the more structure of corruption.
I really
So
wanted
I
to
would
check out If I
definitely
Were the
take-
Devil. Paul Harvey, 1967.
I will definitely do that. But
Yes.
I want the listeners to check out the documentary Zeitgeist Addendum, Corruption and Materialism on YouTube. That's a very good one that explains the banking system and the money system. I want them to research feudalism, if that's the structure that existed with the lords and so on. And then look up Vatican City, Washington, D.C., and London City. Those are all separate organizations.
Definitely going to watch Life and Death.
Life and Death, that's another one about the IMF and the Jamaican economy.
Definitely.
So go ahead, research all of these and tell me if my argument is steeped in a lot of logic and a lot of academic and authority support, and yours is just based on what you think you know. Let's find out which one is really the crazy conspiracy theory.
I really
Vincent helped
enjoyed
me
this.
to wake up.
I really
Have a
enjoyed this
good day. I
morning.
always
Thank you very
enjoy
much.
hanging out with you guys. Take care.
Thank
As
you. Thank you.
usual.
And for the listeners who are interested in checking it out, Life and Depth. It's not death, it's depth. DEBT. Life and Depth. But yeah, it's now 9:50, and unfortunately we have to bring an end to this segment and say our goodbyes. Thanks everyone for tuning in to Activated Mornings this morning. You know, if you want positivity, put it out there. And yeah, that's really all I have to say right now. Be safe today. And for the rest of the week, CELAC is coming.
So, if you want like marriage, you have to put marriage out there too. If you want food, you have to put food out there.
Yeah. If you want food and you're hungry.
You had to put
If I'm
food out
hungry.
there.
No, if I'm
If you want
hungry.
money, you had to put money out there. Have
It's
yourself a
true.
wonderful
When you
day.
think about it. It's true when you think about it.
If you want money, you have to put money out there.
Yeah, you gotta spend money to make money.
Not for lotto.
What?
Maybe
Yeah,
that's
you gotta buy a lot of ticket to be able to make the money.
for a chance. That is true.
Anyways, don't try to
Bye, y'all.
destabilize.
Have a wonderful day.
All
See you
right.
on Friday. Take care.